Okay. Doing my usual thing. Check, check. Okay, we're good. So, today, wanted to start off by saying they introduced events into Discord now. So, I'm pretty happy with that because it takes in Markdown for description. So now I can just set up events with the idea that I can just post it within the event instead of having a like completely different section for stage announcements. However, the problem with that would be is I wouldn't have a repository of past outlines. And I think I still need the message link, so I think I still do what I'm still doing. But then I'll also have to add the outline into the event itself on Discord. So, bunch of. I think it's a pretty good update. I think if the community were to expand more, we would see that as a pretty useful feature into getting other people notified of what's going on um, before the event happens. So I think that's great change. Pretty happy with it. That was something that they were trying to introduce. Excuse me. They were trying to introduce that back when Stage Discovery was there, or back when Stage Discovery was on Discord. And so I think this is their implementation of it. I would have liked to have this during the Stage Discovery phase, but maybe I don't know. Like we talked about before, they'll probably have a different method in place for communities trying to generate content over Discord. Today we're going to be talking about, I guess, the just do a whole recap of what Healthy Dialogue has done so far, as pretty much the sole contributor to most of the content generated with Alon for I think about like five upper bound of 10 of the podcast so far. I didn't know if he wanted to join. It looks like he won't be here. Um, but yeah, I had a couple of questions for myself. So it's pretty much, I figured this podcast would just be kind of an interview of myself and how I think the group is going so far. And maybe we'll do like a recap every 25 podcasts, just to know, like, I guess my headspace or where other people's headspaces are when it comes to the community here, because the whole idea, I suppose, was me understanding the kind of market opportunity that dialogue has and the way that I go about dialogue to understand things in a better light and to come to a better understanding about the various things that matter to me. And the platform in general was supposed to be open discussion for everything, but so far it hasn't. So far, like the volume of people haven't enabled that kind of level of discussion yet, and fair enough, right? I think sharing on the internet is pretty hard to do, and people aren't as willing to be open about what they're doing, the same way that I am. And I'm not necessarily the greatest figure for the community either, because the things that I care about, I'm not sharing on here all the time within the community. So I see Healthy Dialogue kind of as two parts as a brand. It's both a community which hasn't been utilized in the way that I want to see it, and then there's the podcast material, which is supposed to be like outreach plus perspectives giving, just just a just like a refreshing perspective on different things that happen in the world, for just anyone. Like that's pretty much the goal of the podcast material, and I think that's been going okay. Outreach wise, it hasn't done that much, but I would like to say that the podcast material has at least been doing what I expect it to versus what the community, the community growth hasn't. So I think today we'll talk about a bunch of the different dimensions as to like the progress of the brand. And yeah, thanks for being along the ride. I know there's about like three member. It's not so much three members, but there's like three podcast listeners. One of them is a member. And I don't know if the other speakers look back on the podcast. I know one of them who hasn't talked yet had mentioned that he mentioned something to me that kind of indicated that he went back and listened to some of the podcasts, and I was really thrown off by that because um, I wasn't expecting it. So I think he's also one of the listeners, or maybe like an occasional listener. So, anyways, going through the outline, I was going to talk about like the personal changes. So how I was like starting off the community versus now, like what the community has changed so far, and kind of where I want to see the community change to as well. Just some refreshers on what the goal is for that, the content that's being generated, and perhaps go over a little bit of my process, and see if there's any improvements to be had. The originality of the community itself. Is there like other communities out there that are also seeing the same problem within generating dialogue to better understanding? Thanks. And then, kind of as a last piece, I wanted to do. I actually the last piece will kind of freeform and from what I talk about during the rest of the podcast. So I'll bring it up at the end, but it's going to be like a question out to the community and the listeners. I wouldn't have a good way to capture your response, but I figure if the passion is there, hmm, yeah, I don't know. We'll go over some options when we get there, but it'll be a question out to you guys. Personally, I think I was very confident in my ability to generate dialogue in a meaningful way to where everyone in the conversation had a good takeaway from my perspectives, or at least it like helped other. Yeah, I think it only benefited other people when I provided my perspective. And I think starting off with healthy dialogue, I was overly confident in my ability to articulate my thoughts and the thought itself as being helpful. Now I feel like it's less helpful, and I think that's in due to the volume that I'm seeing. So as someone who has accessibility to the different metrics for how the podcast and the community is doing, it's not like it's not going well. Like the idea was to, if it only helped like one person, it was good enough for me. Like the content was good enough for me. However, I've had like different phases where I've shifted away from that idea or that ideal, and it started to become like that one person isn't worth my time talking about or like generating all this content for them. Or I felt like my efforts weren't being reciprocated in the way that I was hoping them to be. So I think I may be saying one thing and I don't actually mean it. Sometimes. That's not true. I think there's times where that's what I genuinely want. I want to help someone else. or like a group of people. It doesn't matter like how many there are as long as it's one. And then there's other days where it's like, as a content creator, I wish there were more. So it's like a conflicting change. Yeah, it's like it. My values change with that, and I don't know. Maybe that's the problem of of the role that I play as being both like the moderator of the community and the content creator for the community as well. So who knows? Like as of right now, I feel like helping one person is a great thing, and I'm happy to help out like one person, even if it's in the future based on the content or it's now. And I know I'm helping at least one person. So because there's a face and a name to it. But I also know there's like two other people that consistently come back. Or maybe it's not consistently too, but there's in terms of metrics right now, um, specifically from the distributor website that handles the sending out the podcast to different platforms, which is run by Spotify, by the way. It's the Anchor service that I've been utilizing, and they have the metrics on there for how many people are listening in on the podcast or downloading it. There's the unique downloads or unique listens has been like 3 consistently. So um, putting that in perspective, yeah, we're doing, as expected. It's more than one, so theoretically I should be happy, and I suppose I am. I suppose I really am. But yeah, I think there's elements of greed in my personal, yeah, pretty much in my identity, and I figure that's going to be around to stay. So, in terms of the community, how much of it has changed since the beginning? So, this hasn't been the kind of growth that I was expecting the community to evolve. Okay, here's the beginning piece. Maybe I should describe this in terms of behavior instead of like volume, because currently the volume is like very minimal. I'm glad to have 2 other people in here that I was not expecting to be in here. There's the speakers, and then there's community members. In the Discord community anyway, sorry. Like I know in the podcast world there's only sole listeners, but then there's also the other side of the brand, which is the Discord community. And the idea of the Discord community was to have people openly discuss whatever was important to them. The biggest problem is that the social environment on the Discord community is so against that, so against that behavior because it's unwelcoming. I think the biggest problem of the Discord community is no one's no one's comfortable with engaging with their ideas on an open platform where they don't know, when there's too many unknowns when they try and get that interaction started. And to be fair, the volume is small, so if someone were to post anything on the Discord anywhere, it'd probably be me or someone else, like in the small group, in the small circle, and their perspectives would just be hit by the same person over and over again. So I think the diversity and the ideas that you would engage with is so minimal that it might not even be worth it. And so that's the kind of environment that the Discord community is at right now. And I don't really foresee that changing too much. I think the podcast material is the biggest thing that's going to keep this thing going, and The Discord community doesn't have something to offer, and I really want that to change. Because I think people openly discussing ideas enables everyone else to also benefit from those ideas from happening. It's like a different kind of content creation from podcasts because it's the same thing. It has the same timeless aspect to it, and you still get the same benefits of dialogue as you would from like listening to these podcasts as well. So the only problem is that it's not a good place to do it yet. There are better places in the world to openly discuss your problems or openly discuss your ideas. This is not one of them yet. And I don't know how to prove the community to, or like the Discord community Discord server to be a good place for that. So kind of wished it's not that I kind of wished it would be better. It's just I know what I need to do. I know what the current problem is. I just don't know how to do it. That's the better way of wording it. I don't actually know what to do. I know what the problem is, and I need to have a better implementation for that. In terms of how the community changed since the beginning, really the growth is pretty small, but it's not. I don't think I should be judging it based on how small it's been. It's just adding two people to the group is phenomenal at 25 weeks. So it's been like a half a year almost. Wow, that's weird to think about. What on podcast 26 pretty much marks the half year point. That's pretty crazy. Wow. Anyways, uh, who knows? I think you could see like a increase in volume to the Discord community at any time. And I really mean that. I think if anyone wanted to join in and they were passionate enough to join, that'd be up to them. Passionate enough to have other people join in their circle, that's up to them. Yeah, yeah. What kind of audience has Healthy Dialogue reached out to? I'm not too sure about that. I know for sure the other speakers here would have a much different, would have like very different content from what I would generate. And I think mine is mostly like self improvement. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is valuing yourself in the way that I feel like you should be valued or like anyone should be valued. And I think that's the kind of audience that I've created around the brand itself. But the brand itself is supposed to be about anything and everything. And maybe that's a bad way to go about it because you won't get any individual attention if it's the same way that I see myself as if you text me in a group chat, I'm the last person to think that you're talking to me if you send like a group question out, you know? So I think having some specified content or like a specified idea that your content creation is generating around, I think that's the best way to see like a influx of, or rather an increase of interest because it's specialized. But that's not how I want to see this platform anyways, because I do want to learn from other people. Like I want it to have as many, I don't want it to be specialized because I don't want that to be the point of the community. And I think the current way the brand is set up still enables for that. I wish I could compartmentalize. That's definitely not the way you say that or the or the right word. But if I could segregate the different ideas out there to specialize it into like subsets of the whole realm of what dialogue could pertain to, that would be great. Because then you would subscribe to only the things that you care about But healthy dialogue is also a process too. It's so weird to think about. It's like I don't even know what this thing is anymore. The idea is that it's supposed to be a brand, but it's a brand revolving around a process of how to understand and develop ideas off of information and perspectives of other people. I guess the brand itself is in the works of what I want it to be. Maybe that needs to be developed fully before before I start asking other people to join. Yeah, I'm definitely not the kind of guy who will go out to my friends and ask if they if they can join out, or just go out to like some social media post and just ask them to join. I mean, I did once. I'm not doing it again though. I'm not the constant advertising character. But in terms of community, I think that's about it. It's like at a spot where I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to move the community in the direction that I want to see it. That's all. Moving on to content. What kind of content has healthy dialogue made? And I was supposed to generate like a whole list of what this was. Maybe I'll have to take a look at the actual YouTube list. But we started off with like some introductory stuff. So the first one was a new community, and that was like a pretty short 35 minute, and I had like some descriptions as to what healthy dialogue was. My first two podcasts were with my headset mic, and that quality was terrible. Oh boy. Yeah, by the third podcast, I had a new mic, this new mic actually, and I don't know. I think it does its job. It's just I've gotten used to it hanging over the front of my face, whereas I didn't have to worry about that ever. Um, but yeah, I can do everything that I want to do with it in front of me. We talked about the complexity of communication. One thing that this community is also dealing with in terms of the complexities of the complexity dimensions of communication when it comes to having dialogue for this community is I don't think everyone speaks at this. Well, I mean, obviously everyone doesn't speak the same way, but I don't think too many people are confident in their articulation abilities to contribute to dialogue in the same way that I feel like I'm contributing to dialogue. I think the ideas need to flow, and you need to be able to be articulate when you're trying to provide your perspective. And I don't know if everyone. Okay. Based on the human interactions that I have, not everyone is articulate with complex ideas in the same way. So I think that's also a barrier that's gatekeeping community growth. So that's like an added complexity that I think isn't that I think is prohibiting the kind of growth that I want to see with the community. But there's no help for that. What else? We talked about dating for the third one. The fourth one is like a continuation of the dating scene, and knowing how you find the one. What was number 5? The age of social media. I was actually very proud of the social media one. What is next? Number 6, reviewing tips for finding the one. We talked about like finding the one a lot. I think that was kind of where my headspace was at too. It's pretty interesting. Number 7, toxicity in games. That was something I always wanted to talk about in general. Podcast 8, losing weight tips. Something that I've been doing over the past like year, almost a year now actually. I've been on a weight loss journey. I'm still at around like 35 pounds, like weight loss. So Yeah, it's great. Maybe if actually no, I'm kind of hitting the 40 mark now that I think about it. I'm about like 40 pounds lighter than what I was before. Yeah, it's a great time. It's a great time. So it's been like a whole year ago. I used to be 215 pounds, and now like around. I'm stabilizing at around like 175. I'm like hovering a little bit above that though, so it's kind of within the 175, 180 range, depending on like how bad I eat or how little I eat. So it fluctuates all the way up and down. Number nine, finding your place in the market. I'm a huge fan of that one too. I think that's the one that's currently being displayed on the YouTube page, the YouTube homepage. So I think I did a really good job at that one. There were some profound moments in that one that I was a huge fan of. Number 10 was the music discussion. I honestly, the music discussion podcasts are such a reliever from from the content that I'm generating. It's not too great that I feel like I'm always up in my head when I'm generating some of um, these podcast material. So I'm glad like Alana's taken up like a music discussion segment. I really enjoy those when they come around. I mean, I think we have a really good time talking about them, and the perspectives that I bring up with him are beneficial for not only myself but for him too. Is my understanding. Podcast 11 was time. I don't really remember too much of that one. I think it was just like explaining time and the dimensions that I saw it. But there's clearly an infinite amount of dimensions that go along with time in general. So exploring more of those could mean that we could revisit the topic again. Podcast 12, appearance. I think Alon was there for that one. Personally, like I see appearance. I'm getting I think for the past like month and a half I didn't really care about appearances too much, but I think it's turning back around. That was actually one of the highest viewed. Ooh, number 9. The finding your place in the market actually has 25 views on YouTube. Okay, so in terms of like YouTube metrics and versus like the other metrics in the from Anchor, they're two different sets of metrics to look at, and at some point in time we switched over to Anchor from YouTube, where YouTube was the pretty much the repository of all the podcast material that we had. So yeah, we did a huge switch up at around like 14, 15. I think it's only been better because the outreach has enabled us to have, I don't know, it just makes it more accessible for other people to listen in on the on the topics that we talk about in the content. So nothing but better. But yeah, there's a huge shift in views overall. Whereas I think the average was around like 6 on YouTube, and then it just shifts to 2 and 1, because I think that's just me. I think that's just me making sure that the video turned out okay. I think that I'm the only contributor to that. Actually, that's not true. There's some people who look back on it still. So I think I know for sure I'm one of the views on YouTube, but then there's like some people that come back around and listen to it on YouTube as well. Or maybe that's me just coming back multiple times, who knows. Um Number 13, conversation around mental health. I forget what I said for this. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I could look at the outline and see like exactly what I went over. Maybe I'll actually do that. What day was that? August 15th. Oh, I see. So for this one, I was bashing most people talking about mental health in like a generic sense. One thing that I don't really like when people talk about society problems, it's like, what the fuck is society problems anyways? It's like, how are you going to generalize the problems of everyone into a collective society label? I don't understand how people talk at that kind of generalized, um, at that generalized level. It's like you can't, I don't think you can generalize anything like that. Like society's problems to homelessness. It's like, no, it's not everyone's problem. That's localized to different parts of the world. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm not a huge fan of when people just bring up like generic terms like that. And I think the only reason I think like that is because back at university I had a professor bash me for using like society or like using generalized terms because it wasn't, he made me understand that generalized terms weren't actually accurate to talking about like the actual problems. Oh, and then we kind of talked about some of the things that I think about. Mental health as a temporary problem. Are the conditions of today worth living? Yeah, that was a good podcast, I think. What else? 14 Healthy Gamer video review. So this was, oddly enough, we got a huge amount of traffic for this one. And I couldn't tell you why. I think people interested in Healthy Gamer took a look at this just to get my perspective on what happened. And this was, I think this is the highest viewed video across both YouTube um, and for Anchor. So I think it's very interesting that we were able to go over Healthy Gamer, which is a current brand um, in the content creation market. Plus, like I mean, the brand is. I mean, I already talked about the brand back then, but yeah, there's a Discord community. It's a service for mental health and coaching. It's a great service run by a really great guy. So yeah, that one did very well, and I think mentioning like Healthy Gamer definitely boosted people's interest into clicking on the podcast. But I don't know if I necessarily want to do that again. Maybe I'll do one in the future. If one comes up that's really good that I really want to talk about, then I'll talk about it. Otherwise, I think I'm good for right now with mentioning other people's content. Healthy Dialogue Podcast 15, The Reflection Process. I think I did well on that one. And I'm not going to go into too much details about that. 16 was Political Climate of September 5th. In general, I think I would want to do more political climate podcasts as well. Like there's like currently I get a bunch of videos of Rand Paul like drilling Dr. Fauci over like stupid shit. It's not like unjustified. I just think it's cringe that he keeps coming back to the same same idea of trying to bash Fauci, hold Fauci accountable and shit like that. It just seems so cringe to me that he'd keep like coming back around to the same thing over and over again, being unsuccessful. But he's still pushing for it. I don't even have all the details. I just don't want to see it. The way he goes about it is just, it's unprofessional to me, is what it looks like. 17 Music Discussion, Jameson Heals Me. I really like this album. And I think you guys should go listen to it too. I think the music is right up my alley, but obviously it wouldn't be up for everyone's alley, but I just think in general music was good. Music was good. Social ranking status was podcast 18. Don't really remember that. Podcast 19, reviewing Finding the One Tips. I think we finished up the segment from before. That took like nine episodes before we got around to it. Podcast 20, keeping inspired and motivated. That one was a good one, I think. I think that the only reason I say that is because I think I was proud of what I generated there and the ideas um, that were brought up to help other people actually keep inspired and stay motivated. Podcast 21, the value of life. Don't really remember too much. Podcast 22, red flags. I think we had a lawn for that. And I think I think that was the time Jacob joined in on the podcast material too. What's his name on Discord? It's Bleg. Yeah, he ended up joining the podcast. He's like an old friend of mine, very old friend of mine. Um, I would have liked to hear his opinions on red flags as well. But it's great that we have more speakers to talk about this stuff when they want to. Healthy Dialogue Podcast 23, social environment. Yes, who you surround yourself with. Yes, it's a good one. Podcast 24, answering the call to responsibility. Still a current problem of mine. Hopefully it'll get better as we go. And then today is the Healthy Dialogue Retrospective. In total, the kind of content that I've generated has been, or I guess between Alon and I, it's pretty good. I think there are great sound bites in each of them. And I think there's some highlighted like podcasts that I'm very proud of. And then there's other ones that I'm just not. They could have been brushed off as like not too important to me. But because I don't think any of the ideas that I've generated are necessarily profound. But the way that I see that all this content has became to be was just because at the time, like some of them I didn't really care for, and I think that showed a little bit in some of them. And I'm not too proud of generating content like that. So I'd have to figure out a way to create something meaningful enough for me to talk about it. Let's take an example. Actually, to be honest, all of these are things that I would want to talk about. I just don't think I delivered them in the way that I wanted to deliver them. But I also believe that I'm probably going to run out of content at some point in time. Because we might have to revisit some of these ideas in the future in case I have a shift in perspective. But I also do want to shift the content in general over to like community generated content. So that it's not necessarily all on me. But I wouldn't know a good way to do that yet. So I think for now it's still going to be at the masses of myself. I'm going to have to take some time to figure out what I want to do for that. Or if anyone else has better ideas, you guys could also chat away at me. Send me like a message or I don't know, post it on the Discord as well. Process to making content. Oh, never mind. I pretty much went over that. Steps to improve content. I don't know what's the best way to improve the content that's already being generated. The outlines that I usually do are things that I would ask myself. So when I'm in discussion, a lot of the times I'm asking myself questions, and so these outlines are a reflection of, like, a mock of what I would normally do when it comes to asking questions over a generated topic. And some of them I think they do well, and other times I don't think they're the best solution for content creation. So eventually I'm going to have to come up with a better way to improve the content. And maybe that's from pulling from different informational sources. But I also think having more volume in terms of people in the community and the podcast would help generate fresh content that's fresh to me, and so that I can provide more fresh content to you guys. I would also like it so other people would be able to stream to the YouTube like a discussion without me having to be here. Because if I'm not here and someone else can't stream it, then it's pretty much a week off of the podcast, and that's not something that I want. The community in general is supposed to be an open discussion, and I just happen to be here most of the time. And I'm able to stream to the YouTube pretty easily, or like also record it at the same time to re-upload that to Anchor. So, yeah, it's there's a lot of problems with that. If I was able to generate a bot that was just here at 4 p.m. and someone just had to close the event like at the end, that'd be great. In fact, I could make an app that schedules for that now that I think about it. Actually, though, I'd have to run that like on have to run that on like a hosting service. Okay, now I'm getting way too in the weeds of what the technological requirements of that app would be. Anyways, um, I suppose that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of content originality. So I think, well, one of the outline questions is, are there other communities like Healthy Dialogue out there? And I think the answer is no. From my understanding, I don't think there are other communities like Healthy Dialogue out there, because Healthy Dialogue is both a brand, it's a process, and it's a podcast. So I think the biggest unique thing there is it's a process. And I think I want people to openly discuss without having the idea of, like, I want people to openly discuss controversial shit and feel like they don't have to be bashed on for holding a belief. Because I think the way that you solve problems is through understanding. And you're not understanding if you're bashing on people for doing something that they believe to be true. Now, I laid out rules like in the rules section that you can't throw out slurs, but you can still be racist and not be like unnecessarily like derogatory towards a certain group. I mean, I guess there is no way to do that. You just don't have to use the racial slurs. So I think you can talk about the ideas of inferiority, and I think that's fine. I think there's a way to provide perspective against that, because I think that, to be honest, I don't think, especially when it comes to like discrimination based on race, I don't think you have any reason to believe that's a good thing or to believe that's accurate. It's like, from average statistical standpoints, yeah, there are inferiorities and differences between different races. But the people that you engage with individually, and that's how you should be treating other people, as individuals, you can't make the same association with the race to the individual, because everyone is an anomaly from the group identity that you want to put everyone to. And so that's why I think like race is, you can't, like, racism is such a bad solution for your superiority complex. It's just not, it's like inaccurate. And that's like my description of it. But again, the idea of healthy dialogue is being able to talk about your perception on what some of these hard topics are without having to be bashed over it. I think the perspective that you come to may be valid in the way that you've experienced life so far, but I will have a different perspective that may lead you to a different outcome that may be better for you. And I think accuracy is always the better outcome. So if we can have a discussion over that without other people throwing out like racial slurs, I think that would lead to every party being happier. And that's what healthy dialogue is supposed to be about. It's a process to understand that the other person that you're engaging with may be racist, or maybe like some bad negative term that you're discussing or that you're talking about. But you know, understanding is the idea that understanding is the takeaway from the process, and that's just so worth it to everyone. That's something that I think everyone should be owed. You should be owed better understanding, because we're all going through life in different experiences, and the collection of experiences is what grows us into people to be better, more than what we are. So, do I think there are other communities like Healthy Dialogue? No. And I think we're still going to be a good solution to. We might be a bad service, but I think we're a good solution to the problem. Is Healthy Dialogue a good solution to the problem? That's my next point. And yes, I just said that. Never mind. I don't know why I just read that point again. All right. So the last portion that I have is the listeners' community member questions. And what I had written down is a common method to content creation is asking viewers for what content they want to hear. So I've seen several, like every content creator that I look at, like especially on YouTube, they just ask for kinds of community, like, what do you want to see next? It's like and subscribe for YouTube algorithm. It's like, I'm not asking anyone to do that, because I think that's pretty cheesy and pretty self-serving for me anyways, and like the community itself. On behalf of the community, if you want to do that, go for it. But on behalf of me, I'm not going to ask you to do that at all. Instead, with the goal in mind, and I'm asking you as individuals and not as an audience, what model could be better to increase community traffic? What would be better to generate content over the Discord, and what would be better content to generate over the podcast? What kind of process do you foresee happening to what kind of solution would you implement to make those two dimensions of the brand better? I think that's like my only question out there. And unfortunately for the podcast listeners, there's not really a good way to do it except for joining the Discord. But that hasn't been like enough incentive for most people to join anyway. So I think the podcast listeners are maybe out of luck, unless if you want to email me. I think my email should be somewhere on there. So that's up to you guys if you want to send one over. And I think that's your only solution for not joining the Discord. So I'm sorry that that's like the case, but I think the people on Discord would have a better time of just sending me a message, or sending like a message out in the Discord community itself. But yeah, like I said before, this community and this like podcast and this brand is just, it's supposed to be more than what it is now. and that's where I want to take it. And I think the way that I've been taking it so far hasn't been the right way. So I think if you guys have better ideas of how to see this idea go, like, be brought out to life in the way that you would want to see it, then I'm all ears for it. But no, in terms of today's podcast, podcast 25, I think like, honestly, let's, at every 25th podcast, let's do like a retrospective like we did today. I think that's a good way to gauge how the community is doing, and it'll keep you guys in the loop of what I foresee the brand is going, or how well the brand is going, and you guys might be able to draw an input as well. Okay, I think with that, I'm gonna be done. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you next week. Not sure what we'll do.